Hey everybody, Sean Dealey here at Sweetwater Studios, Studio B. We're here with the Hazelrigg brothers, George and Joff, who are part of the Hazelrigg brothers trio and also own and run Hazelrigg Industries and DW Fern. We're going to talk today about the techniques that they use for the production of their records that I think are super interesting, and been working on mixing Atmos for their projects for the past couple of years. Very unique way of recording, very high quality, but also somewhat approachable and fairly minimal. You guys want to tell me a little bit about what you guys are doing?
The story begins a long, long time ago. Well, it kind of does, because we've been playing acoustic music for a long, long time. And we've been making albums for a long, long time. You think, oh, you just throw up a couple mics and hit record and you make a record. But for us, our recordings never translated. We play a show or we play, some music, and it's exciting, and you listen back and it just wasn't happening. And it wasn't the performance aspect of it, it's just the recording, it just wasn't connecting with us. There were some major things that we did along the way to get to where we are now. One of those things is that I started assembling for Doug Fern, and we got our heads sort of wrapped around the VT2 sound, that tube preamplifier sound. And that made a huge difference even before we got into the mic end of things.
We also didn't have any money because we were working in the music business.
And,
right. So we had to gravitate towards having fewer pieces of gear because we just didn't have the budget to get into a lot of stuff.
Well, I know about the technique, but you kind of migrated from that idea to throwing a few mics up, and that's kind of where you guys landed. Obviously, very specific placement and choices. So, like, what kind of mics did you get to after finding the VT2 and Doug Fern's preamp design and stuff like that?
We had a Royer R121 that we'd used for a while.
Which is a great mic.
Long before, I knew anything about DW Fern. We had some familiarity with ribbons, and we had some condensers, not great condensers. But Doug, his approach to recording is he uses more ribbons than anybody. After talking to him a lot about ribbons, we gravitated toward using more ribbons ourselves. With some different setups and different ribbon mics, we ended up with a pair of the AEA R88 microphones. When we talk about recording drums, when we started recording as engineers, setting up a ton of microphones. I don't know, a dozen microphones, because that's what you do, right?
Yeah.
You
as many as possible.
Mic
right?
the bottom side of every cymbal.
Yeah, go
Right?
for it. Yeah.
We started paring things down. This is even before we were recording our own acoustic music, but paring things down, and you do these sessions and you throw up a stereo mic above the drums and a kick mic, and it's like, wow, this is really coherent. This sounds great. And we did some recordings with I think it was a mono R84 in front of over the drums. If you haven't done that, do it once.
Yeah.
Because although it doesn't give you this big spread and all this stuff, everything is super coherent and
It
punchy.
sounds like drums.
Punchy.
Like,
Yeah.
if you're like naturally looking for that sound, a lot of times when we talk about drums, especially in popular music, there's not a lot of like real drums left in a lot of that stuff. So like, depending on your approach, but like doing that really kind of, takes a snapshot of what's going on with the drum kit. So if you have a player that can play and it's tastefully tuned and red cymbals and all that stuff, you put up one microphone, that's the sound of the drums.
Yeah, you know what's going on.
Yeah.
But you can still manipulate that a lot. I mean, even just one overhead ribbon mic, there's a lot of low information in that, and you can squash it really hard and tune it up so you get what you want out of it. And you can get something that sounds more even trashy or trap kitty or whatever just with that one.
Yeah, and you
signal.
don't have all of the interplay from like the phase relationships of all the microphones and knowing all that
Right.
stuff. It's more about like finding a spot that sounds like the drum kit and putting the mic there and getting that. And I mean, like, talking about the R88, I don't think I've recorded drums in the past 15 years without using one of those on a session.
Yeah,
and it's like, I always tell people, it's like standing in front of the drum kit, and that's what it sounds like. And
Yeah.
so you turn that up and you're like, that's the drums.
Yeah.
You can manipulate that or add things or take things away, but that microphone, it just captures a snapshot of that. And I think that being said, and along with the stuff that you've been doing, to tie into the Atmos thing, that microphone specifically with the Bloom line, with the two ribbons at 90 degrees to each other, allows for the Bloom line pickup pattern, which is effectively a 360 degree pickup. So if we're talking about stereo, that gets a really cool thing, adds depth of field in stereo, but in Atmos, that depth of field becomes more realistic and feels deeper. So by being able to take that microphone and bring it into this platform, that allows for like a more expansive, a more effective experience of being in a room with something.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, if you have a group of musicians, you have that thing in the middle. It translates when you get it in here. Your head is in the middle. Your head is that microphone.
right, and it's a neat thing to be able to pull it in and out of space, and the way that it translates. And I really encourage anyone that hasn't had a chance to listen to the Synchronicity record that you guys put out that's in Atmos on Apple Music to like experience that just in regular headphones, AirPod Pros, AirPod Maxes, and kind of get a feel. Even on a phone turned sideways, there's a spatialized experience that I was able to take your minimal miking technique, which we'll get into a little bit more detail, but it's effectively 4 channels of microphones, and we made something that feels extremely immersive.
Yeah, right. So we use 2 in our configuration for recording because, you know, we have such a small, tight recording space. I live in a townhouse. The ceiling is 7 feet high. We've got a 7-foot Steinway piano in one corner. There's nothing about this room that is large.
Acoustically appealing either, yeah. I mean, it's just sort of a dead space.
Yeah.
I mean, it's tuned, but it's dead.
So we have the piano in one corner, we have the drums sort of on one side, and I play acoustic bass. I jam myself between the drums and the piano and the computer so I can hit record.
Well, I like to joke that, you know, when we started producing records, we started miking drum kits with like, say, 7 mics. And then we dropped that to 5, you know, and then it went down to 3 when we figured, oh, well, yeah, this works with a kick drum in it. And then it dropped to 2, and now we record with none.
Right, because it's actually the
We
bass
just mic
mic.
the
It's-
bass
yeah,
mic,
and
yeah,
then
and
the
that-
drums
and
get in that microphone.
Right.
The idea of home recording and, you know, so many people trying to get something that, you know, oh, hey, I need to be in this huge space. And we've done a lot of experimental recording here at Sweetwater, whether it's in Studio A or we have a racquetball court that we've been reamping, pre-recorded music for Atmos, for ambience. The stuff that you've recorded in, like, effectively a basement studio in Atmos sounds massive. Like, it sounds like a fully expansive space,
Right.
which is a pretty amazing feat for something that is, you know, a fairly common occurrence for someone to be recording themselves in a basement, you know? So I think there's also another layer to the way that you guys work that is an interesting component that I've been quite impressed by. But what format and what sample rate do you guys record all of this stuff at?
Yeah, so another part of this, getting the recording to connect emotionally, because PCM wasn't doing it for us.
PCM is just like a standard
Digital
WAV file.
audio.
Yeah,
Pro Tools, everybody uses it. I mean, that's what comes out of your iPhone. Many, many years ago, 20 plus years ago, a good engineer friend of ours,
Charlie Pilzer, yeah.
yeah, Air Show in Washington, D.C., said to us,
Tonal Park Studios.
right.
Yeah.
He said to us, you know, you guys should check out this new DSD recorder. It's this whole other format. You know, you'd probably be into it. And we got one of these little Korg units. We did just a couple recordings with it, and it's life-changing.
So, sidebar, when I first started working at Sweetwater, you guys were here for a product demo for, I think it was involved with Tascam and
Right.
the JBL speakers. And so you set up in our performance theater here, and it was the 2 of you. I think it was a pair of Earthworks on a Jacqueline disc, so like a stereo recording
Right.
technique, into DSD, and then on a pair of JBL M2 like large format monitors. And I was kind of just like, what is going on here? Who are these guys? And so they did a pass of the recording, and when they hit play, it sounded better than you guys playing, which just blew my mind. And so like it's a completely different form of digital audio than what we're used to, so it is kind of difficult to deal with in a capacity of their super large files. But you guys use a product that we sell here at Sweetwater for Merging Technologies to record all of your records, correct?
Right, so we use a Hapi interface. It's got 8 digital ins and 8 outs, and it records at 11.2 megahertz.
Cool.
Which, so it's also referred to as DSD 256, which is 256 times the resolution that you find on a typical CD.
It's 256 times the sample rate. It's worth noting that it's what they call a 1-bit system. So, you know, instead of having your 24-bit
Bit
depth,
yeah.
right, you have a bit, and every time it takes a snapshot for a new sample, it either moves up in amplitude or down in amplitude in steps. But it's moving so fast that, you know, you'll You're not missing anything
Right, yeah.
in terms of that. And in fact, the dynamic response, I mean, this is, I think, kind of a key thing for us as engineers. Everybody talks about frequency response of everything. Oh, well, I'm looking at this frequency, is this flat? You know, that means nothing to us. We're concerned with capturing dynamics because that's where the meat of a performance is, you know, like that's where all the emotional content is.
I mean, so that being said, like that, the untangible emotional content in music that happens when there's dynamic range and interplay and humans playing together, DSD kind of does that. And the thing that we have found since working together, that Atmos also does that and conveys an emotional component of the recorded music back to the listener, which I think is the best part about Atmos. And in conjunction with the DSD capture, and so like just to be fully transparent, we take DSD files and they convert them to PCM and send them to me to do an Atmos mix at 2448. And so the actual analog to digital conversion happens when you guys record on the Emerging Technologies box. So a lot of the benefits of DSD are some of the aliasing and stuff that is not there that is in PCM files, which in a format like this where things are unmasked, the buildup of like a low frequency resonance in the actual recorded file becomes less apparent and has more clarity throughout it. So it's not a super noticeable thing until you sort of start listening to these things. And then it's like kind of apparent that you're like the stuff that you fight with in a PCM converted file isn't quite there. So you guys have, you know, pretty big sounding ribbons with a lot of information, but there's not like a cloudiness that's there that normally has to get sort of cleaned up. There's like a transparency to the whole thing that really is fairly impressive. So.
Yeah, and actually, to compound that, when somehow, and I don't know anything about how Atmos works other than what guys like you tell me, but somehow when those files get into mix in this room, we get more detail out of it. I don't understand how we do, but when we first listened to the Synchronicity mix here, I couldn't believe that there were notes that we played that we didn't remember playing. I mean, you can hear, you know, John, our drummer, just tap a drum with his finger or just hit his knee with his hand like this, and you can hear every little detail of that.
I mean, and I didn't do anything too special to it besides the techniques that I've been working in that have been trying to expand stereo into spatial in a way that I feel feels the most spatial. And so a lot of it is like I do a little bit of you know, taking the microphones that you send me, I've duplicated them, I've decorrelated them with some EQ so I can spread them out. Some of the stuff that I do, which is kind of interesting and I don't think it's talked about a lot, is like using phantom center from the stereo recordings, both left to right and front to back. And so that creates sort of more of like a three-dimensional space that the music lives in. That also translates very well to binaural, also translates very well to Apple Spatial, also translates really well to a phone. And so all these like components to it, like I think it's like a really great match to kind of do this sort of stuff. And, you know, they send me 4 channels of audio effectively. You guys had printed some reverb on a vintage Lexicon unit that you had that I used as part of the sound as well. But like effectively it's just that, and it sounds super dimensional, but super detailed. And yeah, it's been a really kind of a super interesting process to kind of get into that, because I have been doing a lot of Atmos mixes with like full productions and tons of stuff and like, you know, like a regularly produced album with, you know, multi-mic drums and all that stuff. And so hearing this and how expansive it can be by just having a little bit, I think is super amazing. But I think that that's also something that we're getting caught up on. There's a lot of chatter about recording techniques for Atmos. And I think like really approaching it as a really great stereo recording, or like even just a stereo recording, translates equally as well and can be used and played with in the Atmos space and yield really great results. So
yeah, we should mention actually how we have our microphones set up. And so we have the piano in one corner of my basement, and that has a dedicated R88 over it because it's a grand piano, and with the soundboard, the sound is kind of moving this way.
Yeah.
It's like a speaker cone, you know, the soundboard.
And that piano sounds great in the recording. Like it's an awesome, extremely natural, but also like just really balanced, and you know, that sound itself is an amazing piano recording.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, so we take the other R88 and we position it between the drums and the bass, but it's really...
It's 8 inches off the bass. Yeah, it's pretty close to the bass.
Yeah, it's probably, I don't know, 3 feet
from the drum kit. Yeah.
So physically mixing the blend in the microphone. So the bass
Right.
getting the proximity that it needs, and then also the drum kit being a little further away so it's not overpowering the bass.
Right.
And I mean, I think a lot of people should probably experiment more with mic placement rather than trying to fix it later.
Absolutely.
So something like this is a great example of like, understanding that if you want the bass to be louder in this microphone, you bring it closer to the bass and further from the drums, and sort of, that balance. And I've done a couple experimental recordings with a single R88 too, and it's like, baffling people off and like kind of moving things further away. You're mixing physically how that sounds. And so to get the balance you want, you have to do, you have to experiment a little
And
bit.
you have to have musicians that are capable of not playing so loud that they're overpowering the other
you need to
people.
know what your neighbor's doing and how to work together. So it's not, I don't think it's appropriate for every style of music, but especially acoustic music. I'm still waiting to find a bluegrass band to do something in Atmos with. I've got conceptually a really amazing idea, and it just hasn't really come together yet. But someone that understands the dynamics of performing around a single microphone already and doing that and transposing that into Atmos, I think will be a really awesome experience for the listener. So still some, stuff to try.
I think you can do this with rock bands too. You can do it with amps in the room, and it really, it's like what you said, you have to know what your neighbor's doing. But that process of refining your performance so it works in that methodology is refining your band. And so you're eventually going to get a better product in the end.
Yeah, if there could be a band that shows up, sets up and plays, and everyone's already self-balanced, and the drummer plays the level that the bass player is playing, and the guitar players are both the same,
You'd have Motown.
It's a dream experience. Anybody has a band like that, give me a call. But that is something that it rarely happens. But I think that that's something to think of. Is like you are creating a cohesive piece of music. Why do you not already fit together? Like that is something that should be conceptually going. And that's if I'm producing a recording and we're putting together sounds, it's always conceptually like, how is this going to fit together? What sounds work? How do these drums work? And that production side of things is like what I'm really thinking of. But like getting a band in the room to also conceptually know that, I think people need to maybe work on that some more.
Yeah, and then the recording becomes transparent and the experience becomes much more natural.
Right, like if there was a band that you stood in front of and it was like, man, that sounds amazing, that would be an amazing. That would be an amazing recording of that. So that takes a little bit of preconceived idea behind that, but I think that
it's more work on the front end.
Yeah.
But it's less work on the back end too,
sure
right?
is. So, which is there's so much goes into recording, post-recording these days.
Yeah.
That it's an idea behind capturing a performance with people, with that human interaction that I think is like very non-tangible but there, and I think translates emotion, which I think your technique and combined with Atmos is like a perfect example of how to like get that to the listener more effectively.
That's why we're here, Sean.
That's been a super awesome sort of chat about what you guys do and what we're doing. So if you get a chance, we'll link it down below, links to the record that we've worked on, and I think there's another record coming soon. So I really appreciate you guys being here, and thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks for having us.